Before we continue with today's presentation, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of traditional lands. Royal Roads University acknowledges that the campus is located on the traditional lands of the Esquimalt and Songhees ancestors and families who have lived here for thousands of years. This land has been part of the fabric of the life of Indigenous communities long before Hatley Castle was built, and it will be long into the future. It is with gratitude that we now learn and work here where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff come together. So for today's Leading with Trust webinar, we have Dr. Charles Krusekopf, the MBA program head. We have Mike Atkins, Master of Arts in Leadership alumni and Doctor of Business Administration student, Andrea Torres, Recruitment Manager, and my name is Yamara Angus, and I'm an Education Advisor. And I am so excited to welcome Charles up to introduce himself and introduce Mike.
Okay, thank you very much, Imara. Charles Krusekopf here, and this is, as they mentioned, the 6th session that we've had in the speaker series thus far. And as you'll know, there are the different sessions in the past, and so just seeing the traditional acknowledgement there. And our last session was on reconciliation with Hope Sanderson, so you can go and watch that webinar that's available. And the previous sessions are all recorded there, and this session will be recorded and placed there, and anybody who misses it will be able to catch it there. So today's session, I was really excited. We were doing some work. So I lead the MBA program, but then we've gotten to meet at least virtually, the DBA students, and the new cohort that's come into our DBA program here at Royal Roads. And one of the students was Mike Atkins, who's speaking today on Leading with Trust. And Mike and I had some interesting discussions in that opening thing, in part because he is an alum of the executive coaching program here at Royal Roads, the graduate certificate, and is a professional executive coach. And I'm in that program currently, and I think we have some people from the program or alums from that program who are joining us. That's one of the fabulous programs at Royal Roads. And I'll say, Mike, then when we started talking and reviewing his bio, he's probably one of the most degreed people from Royal Roads. He got his Master's of Leadership. He did a Change Management graduate certificate. He did his Executive Coaching graduate certificate. And now he couldn't get enough. He's back for our Doctorate of Business Administration program. So that just shows you that people just can't get enough. They keep coming back. And he brings all of that into today's topic, as he'll talk about in terms of how change and trust and coaching in his work. And he was previously with the Department of Defense, and then now as a consultant and still working with Department of Defense, and has been doing some work on executive coaching with Department of Defense and serves as a consultant. And so I will turn it over to Mike, because I know he has a fabulous presentation, and we're going to be using some breakout rooms and other tools as we would do in a class or in a session at Royal Roads. So Mike, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'm just going to get my presentation set up here. There we go. Can we see my screen? Thumbs up. Outstanding. Yeah, thank you so much, Charles. And you know, it truly is an honor to be here. Yeah, like Charles mentioned, I had the opportunity to meet him at a Doctorate in Business Administration student staff networking event, and we immediately connected through the common ground that we both kind of we see coaching as an incredible tool to be able to support leadership development. And some of the research I'm doing here with Trust is focusing on how to develop trust through the application of executive coaching. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail throughout my presentation. So thank you, Amara, for doing the land acknowledgement. But because we're geographically dispersed in this virtual environment, I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that I'm presenting from what is now known as Victoria, which is the traditional territory of the traditional unceded territory of the Lekwungen people. So before I get this presentation going, I think it might be important for me to start with my motivation, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And when I take a look at the world that we work within, we're taking a look at our VUCA environment, which is the volatile, unpredictable, complex, and ambiguous world. The challenges that we're seeing that deal with globalization and climate change and introduction of new technology, the requirement for leadership has never been more important than it is right now. And as you can see on this on the slide deck here, I have a picture of my family, my wife Emily, and my daughters Violet and Marie. You know, I think to myself, you know, what am I doing to be able to support to support the future of tomorrow? So inspired by Dr. Peter Hawkins, he asks a wonderful question, is what are you doing to prepare yourself for the future generations of that leaders will need to deal with the challenges of tomorrow? And the work that I'm doing here is indirectly in service of that. Taking a look at trust. Trust is incredibly complex, and there's some significant challenges that we're dealing with trust that I'll present throughout this webinar here. But the idea of what I can particularly offer to this to the leadership challenges of tomorrow is my hope is to be able to understand and develop ways that leaders could increase levels of trust in within their workplace in a relational sense. So what are the outcomes of our presentation today? It is my hope by the end of this presentation, we understand the mechanics of trust, and we can recognize where trust problems might exist and how to deal with trust problems. And to do that, there's just some basic things that we'll talk about. We'll discuss why trust is important. We'll get into defining trust, and then what's required to make a trust decision, the qualities of trustworthiness, and then we'll put that into application. So acknowledging that we're all connecting in a very virtual environment, and it is a lunch session for most of us, I'm just wanting to challenge everybody here with the idea of what is one thing that you might be able to do within your environment that might help you make the most of this session? Is it turning off the extra browser in the background on your computer? Is it putting the Outlook away? Or maybe it's turning your mobile device off. That's up to you, but I would invite everybody to reflect and consider what might be one thing you could do to help you make the most of this session today. So I'd like to start this session by acknowledging currently where we're at. Based on what I'm seeing right now in the literature and a lot of the stuff that is showing up, we're experiencing some of the lowest trust levels ever recorded. Here's some instances that I can represent here. Last year, the United Nations Security General stated that turbulence is on the rise, and we're dealing with trust challenges that are declining throughout our nations. We're seeing the deficit in our streets across nations everywhere. The Edelman Trust Barometer is it's a very reliable source, and they've been doing trust studies for the last 20 years. And this is the most recent one of within the last few months here. So the 2021 survey indicated that 56% of respondents felt that that business leaders were purposely trying to mislead people by saying things that that are falsely or gross exaggerations. And in that same study, 65% of Canadians indicated that they do not trust that their current leaders will be able to successfully address our country's challenges. Similar themes are seen in other studies as well. The Gustafsson Brand Index, which is published yearly by the University of Victoria, they indicate that brands that were assessed in 2021 are at an all-time low. And then we have the Can Trust poll, which is it's a trust index that we use within Canada that's been measuring trust for the last 7 years now, which highlighted that Canadians' willingness to trust large corporations, management, boards of directors to do what is right has declined. So why does trust matter? Trust is a social lubricant that allows businesses to be conducted efficiently. When there's mistrust in an organization, workflow will stall, and there's often financial costs associated with it. This phenomenon has been referred to in the literature as the economics of trust. So when there's a lack of trust in an organization, oftentimes you obviously need to recompensate with that with some sort of financial outset. An example of that could be seen in 9/11, for example, when we stopped having high levels of trust or levels of trust of people coming through security gates. We needed to double down on infrastructure to check people through security gates. We needed to hire more staff to be more efficient in letting people through through security. And ultimately, that just costed more money because there was a lack of trust there, and that could be seen in all kinds of places in business. So some of the benefits of having trust, I just put them up on the screen here, but just to list a few. It's good for morale. It helps empower ethical decision making. Overcomes resistance to change, builds teamwork and collaboration, increases loyalty and willingness to stay in the company, breaks down corporate silos and isolating behaviors. It's one of the markers that you'll see in through the International Coaching Federation, for example, as to create a trusting coach relationship. It produces increased speed and improved efficiency. So that's kind of what I was talking about, the economics of trust previously. And it decreases stress level and work hostility. And it supports the sharing and the development of ideas. So how do we know that that we're seeing symptoms of low trust? Well, here's some of the things that will show up. There's often a lack of feedback or thoughtfulness between employees. There's lots of bureaucracy or inefficiency within organizations, lack of risk-taking, fear of change, passive management groups, high-level employee turnover rates, unstable customer bases, and you'll sometimes see like there's volatile or depressed stock prices because you're not trusting the investments you'd make. So just acknowledging where the current state is and what trust looks like. What can we do to build trust? So there's a lot of conversation out there, and we're often talking about the importance of trust, and we know that trust is important because it comes up all the time. But not too many people clearly understand what trust is, and it's more than just a feeling. So when you can understand what trust is and properly measure it, then we can have a foundational understanding on how we can improve it. So over the next few slides, I'm going to take the opportunity to look at defining trust here. So the definition that I subscribe to for defining trust is Mayer Davis and Scorman. They have quite a useful definition, which I quite like. But it's the willingness to make yourself vulnerable to the actions of an individual or party when you cannot control the outcome. So just looking at this definition in detail, to the actions of an individual or party. So this, when I've just highlighted this part, just to highlight the fact that trust is, it's pluralistic in the sense that you know, it requires more than one person. So there's multiple perspectives at play. And that sometimes creates some of the trust challenges that we do see, because trust can be seen very differently through the different lenses. So with that being said, I'm just really curious on probing the room here. And I would like to take the opportunity just for you to reflect on the following question. Well, first off, who do you trust? And if you can just think of that for a second, and then ask yourself the question, why do you trust that person? How do you act that shows them that you trust that person? So just flipping it a little bit, I would invite you to consider the question, who trusts you? And then the question, should they trust you? How do they behave that suggests that they trust you? So I believe those questions are useful in the sense that it just sets the stage that some of the literature shows that people often believe that they're more trustworthy than they're actually perceived. And that's that could be considered as an antecedent to some of the trust challenges that we're seeing. So what do we do with that knowledge? Well, when you take a look at it through when you take a look at it through a coaching perspective, or even like a human dynamics or systems perspective, mental models are one thing that stand out for me. And Senge will let us know that mental models are deeply ingrained or held pictures that each of us hold in our mind that influence how we understand the world. So if we acknowledge that everybody has their own unique mental models that inform how we see the world differently, that would tell, you know, that lets us understand that one person might have a very different perspective of what trust means for them, opposed to how you might perceive trust could be for you. And as we go through the presentation and unpack the trust model a little bit, we can understand specifically what parts of trust you could spend time focusing on. So with regards to mental models, Chris Argyris comes up with the ladder of inference, which is a great tool to be able to address mental models. When looking at these mental models, he takes a look at starting at the bottom of the ladder of inference. And when you start at the bottom of the ladder of inference, it's the idea of what facts and data do we have? And then once we understand that information and we move up to that, move up the ladder, it's okay, well, we add meaning and then we make our own assumptions, and then we create actions. So on the right-hand side of the slide, I put a scenario in here that might kind of depict how the ladder of inference would work. So if we're in a meeting, for example, and you notice that a committee member was looking at their phone and not contributing to the meeting, that's just a piece of observed data. But once you add a piece of meaning to that, that person, a person might use their mental models and say, well, that person doesn't contribute. It means that they don't care. And then once you've added that piece of meaning, then you can go a little higher up the ladder, and you can add an assumption to that meaning, which if people don't care, they shouldn't be invited to future meetings. And then once you've made that assumption, you might lead to an action. And the idea is, okay, well, in this scenario, well, I won't invite Joe to the next meeting. The thing about the ladder of inference is we're allowed to step off that ladder at any point. So once we get to the observable data piece, as one committee member is looking at their phone, you can ask yourself the question, well, you know, what does that really mean? And you can check your mental models at that point, and you can ask yourself that question. Or even if you moved right up to the assumptions piece, you can step off the ladder and you can ask yourself the questions whether or not you're seeing the world through your own mental models, or this is fact. But the idea is to have a tool that can allow you to understand whether or not you're perceiving the world through your own assumptions, or is it fact? So with that information, and I'm just hoping that that might set the stage for going into the trust frameworks here, because a lot of the framework it's going to require understanding how we might address some of our mental models. So making a decision to trust. A good friend of mine and colleague, Dr. Daryl Stickle, he has a useful model that allows us to understand a framework that allows us to make a decision to trust. And it's argued that trust is a combination of uncertainty and vulnerability. So when you take a look at the uncertainty piece, it's asking yourself the question, if I were to make this decision, how likely am I to be harmed? And with the vulnerability piece, it's, if I'm harmed, how bad will it be? And if these two questions can be satisfied, the idea of actually having a trusting relationship or being able to trust somebody, the probability is just a little bit higher. So looking at that in just a little bit more detail here. So making, with respects to perceived uncertainty, the idea is if you commit to an action, how likely are you to be harmed? There's a couple pieces of context that you can look at here. So looking at the perceived uncertainty, there's two things that could inform that one piece. Is the context. So what does someone's situation suggest about how they act? So when you have a better understanding of that, you can maybe fill in a little bit of the voids with perceived uncertainty. And then the individual, what do you know about that person that will help you predict how they act? So the more familiar with someone, you know, obviously you can have more certainty with making a decision, but the less certain you are, what do you need to know to be able to sort of create that decision-making process? With regards to perceived vulnerability, it's the idea of if you are harmed, how bad will it be? So when you have to, when you're looking at vulnerability, it implies that you have something to lose. And the higher the stakes are, the more important trust becomes. So how vulnerable you are depends on the real level of vulnerability of what's at stake and how much is at stake. Some things that can lend to that are exaggerations and misperceptions. So that comes back to the ideas of the mental models. Like if you were to take a look at the ladder of inference that we talked about, what exaggerations might you be making, or what misinterpretations are you making in a specific situation? So at this point, with regards to uncertainty and vulnerability, I'm just wondering if we if we could move into a quick brainstorming session in breakout groups. And we would explore how might we navigate perceived uncertainty and perceived vulnerability in a new relationship to encourage trust. And we'll move into groups of 5 or 6, or 4 or 5, sorry. And on completion, Amara has this great tool we'll use. It's called Jamboard, and we'll post up some of our ideas just to really kind of help the collective intelligence in our group here really see like what particular things show up as far as creating ways we can navigate uncertainty and vulnerability.
Awesome. And I can actually share out the Jamboard link right now, and I can do a quick overview of how to use it, and I'll show everybody really quickly. And then that way, while people are in the breakout groups, they can always add notes as well. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, can everybody give me a thumbs up if they see a black background with some images on it? Looks like Jamboard, says Jamboard. Yep, getting a thumbs up. Thank you, thank you. Awesome. So this is Jamboard. Give me a laugh cry face if you've used this before. So how to use it, it's really, really simple. Is you click on the sticky note option. You can see kind of where my arrow is pointing to. You click on that icon, type your comment for the discussion, and then you can click save. So with the link, you'll see that this is the how-to page. And to navigate between the questions, so for the breakout room, the first question, you can just navigate with the arrows up here. So this toggles back and forth. So use this to navigate between pages. And question 1 is the question you'll be answering. And you're welcome to add your post-it notes and comments through this function. All right. Thumbs up if that makes sense. And Andrea will be putting everybody into a breakout room. So in just a moment here, you'll be invited to join a breakout room, and we'll have you in the breakout room for 5 minutes, and then we'll invite you back into the main room.
How are we looking? Are we all back from the breakout groups yet?
Yes, everyone's back.
Outstanding. Okay. Yeah, so here's a few things that are just showing up on the Jamboard here. You know, I always believe in the idea of collective intelligence over individual intelligence. And when it comes to how we would be able to navigate perceived uncertainty and perceived vulnerability, you know, great job, team, you know, as far as coming up with some ideas on how we could encourage it. Is there any way that we could have a snapshot of that to be able to send out after the session, Amira?
I'll make sure to send it out with the recording link to everybody who registered.
Great. So I'm just going to go back to my screen share again here. Okay, so moving on with the presentation. So we just investigated the elements of making the trust question, whether or not to trust someone or a party. But there's qualities of trustworthiness as well that we can lean on as multiple levers to support the development of trust. So some of the qualities of trustworthiness, and this is a widely accepted model by Mayer, Davis, and Scorman. They highlight that the 3 characteristics of trustworthiness include integrity, benevolence, and ability. So I'd like to just unpack each one of those items just a little bit further here. So when taking a look at the ability component, it's the way that we look at it through the trust definition is, can you do your job? Do you have the ability to do the function that you're being trusted to serve? An example just right off the top of the head here could be, I think that lots of us would probably be reluctant to have a surgery from a doctor who has, or someone who has no formal medical training. And, for me personally, I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't trust that person. But there's lots of other situations where we can see that you need to demonstrate that you have the ability to do the function that you're doing. So when we take a look at ability through, like when we take a look at multiple perspectives through mental models, for example, what the question is, what can you say that would demonstrate ability, and what can you do to demonstrate that you have the ability to do the job? And then the reverse would be, well, how would you know others are demonstrating ability in what they say and do? So I'm just curious if we can just start, maybe just we could fire a few things in the chat just to work on that collective intelligence thing here again. What particular things could you say to demonstrate that you have the ability to do what you're saying you're going to do? What particular things do you think you could do to demonstrate that you have the ability to do what you're going to, you can do the job? And then just flipping it a little bit, what particular actions would you expect others to say and do to demonstrate their ability? Wonderful, lots of great stuff here. So I don't want to, we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm just going to keep moving on here. And I'm hoping that we could save the chat at the end of this session. We can talk about that towards the end so we can make sure we capture all this great work that we're doing here. So the next component here for trustworthiness is integrity. So do you follow through on your commitments? When you take a look at integrity, the way I like to take a look at that is through the idea of we all have our very different pictures and perspectives that we have of every individual situation. So this leads back to the mental models piece. So for example, a scenario that I can think of here would be if someone were to ask me to build them a house. I don't know why they'd ask me to build them a house, because that's not something I'm even good at. But if they were to ask me to build a house, like here I am, I'm going to go do a really great job, and I'm going to go build them a 3-story house that's going to have like a grand entryway, and it's going to have a 3-car garage and all the things, right, that are important to me. But, that person's going to be, okay, well, that's not necessarily what I wanted. I just wanted a ranch style house, and I wanted it to, I wasn't too critical about the 3-star or the 3-car garage. I wanted to have an external office, a studio in the back of the house. So what I'm trying to get at here is we can all have very different perspectives of what the outcome could be. So when it comes to integrity, it's important to be very clear about creating a shared narrative on what the outcome is going to be. And that could be done in a couple different ways. For starters, when you're having a conversation, being very clear about upfront about what success is going to look like. What are the key performance indicators? And then towards the end, circling back and verifying that you've met those requirements. So we said we were going to do this, this, and this. I just want to check in with you. Have I done this, this, and this? Like, just to create that feedback loop. And when you do that, you're raising your probability of maintaining your integrity. It's the idea of like when we just have those small little integrity wobbles where something slips through the cracks and we didn't follow through on something that we said we're going to do for somebody, or we had a misinterpretation of what they expected, is where the integrity fails can start showing up. So in the theme of our collective intelligence piece, with regards to integrity, are there anything else that we can think of what we can say to demonstrate integrity, that we follow through on our commitments, and what we can do? And I would invite you just to put that into the chat. And learn to say no when you can't. And be truthful as possible. Follow through on your commitments, yeah. Clarity on expectations. Lots of great stuff here. That's great. So I'm hoping that we can you can take this stuff away in the chat, and it's just something else for you to take away from this session here. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the last quality of trustworthiness, and that one's benevolence. Do you have my best interest at heart? So this one's particularly challenging because we see it often. And in leadership, it's the idea of, consistently demonstrating that you do have that person's best interest in heart. And it's important to know that just because we're demonstrating benevolence, we don't need to make ourselves a pushover. A lot of people that I coach in this area, they're like, well, like if I'm constantly doing that, like then they're going to think that I'm not as firm or as assertive as I prefer to show up. But that's not the case. It's about when you're delivering your message, it's about making sure that, you think of a way that you can, sometimes when times are tough, you have to be able to sort of be firm, but also doing it in a way where you can articulate why you're doing it in a way that shows that you do have their best interest at heart. So in that theme, with regards to benevolence, I'm just wondering if we can just fire some stuff in the chat that might be able to support things that we can say, things we can do, and what would you expect others to do to be able to demonstrate that they have your best interest at heart? Acknowledging it may be tough for them to hear. Discussing strategies that might help them succeed. Be honest about commitment, yeah. Some really good stuff here. Transparency, invite input. Yeah, demonstrating emotional intelligence. That's wonderful. So we've just covered the concepts of trustworthiness here with Mayor Davis and Scorman's framework that look at integrity, benevolence, and ability. And when you balance those out and you keep those in mind in trust situations, the probability of you increasing trustworthiness significantly increases. And there's a lot of literature that supports that. I'm just wondering if we can take an opportunity to just do a quick 5-minute breakout group, and just acknowledging our time. We might not jump into a Jamboard on completion, but do have a discussion about like how we might be able to demonstrate your trustworthiness, knowing that we have this model of ability, integrity, and benevolence. Welcome back, everybody. Well, just based off what I'm seeing on the Jamboard, it seems like we went off and had some really interesting discussions about the elements of trustworthiness. So just acknowledging our time, I'm just going to move the session on and just do a quick recap. So in this session, we talked about why trust is important, the definition of trust, making trust decisions, and the qualities of trustworthiness. We did some breakout groups that looked at how we can put trust into application here. So in closing, I do truly believe that the future is hopeful. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been experiencing some of the lowest trust levels that have ever been recorded, but I do remain optimistic. Trust is measurable and leadership is changing. Businesses are constantly seeing the merit of transformational leadership approaches that are changing the way that we lead our organizations. So I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to come out and spend your lunch with me if you're on the West Coast, or being here for this session. And with the time that we have left available, I'm just wondering if there's any questions that I can be able to answer or try answer.
Yeah, and we know that some people have to leave. I'm going to have to leave, actually. I'm going to have to go to another meeting, but I think Mike can stay and answer some questions. Those of you who are here and want to continue asking some questions, either directly using the mic or using the chat as well.
Yeah, I'll stay and answer any questions.
And before anybody sneaks off, we do have another Insights for Action session coming up next month, and Andrea is going to pop the link in the chat. It would be great to see everybody there again. And thank you so much for joining us. And over to you again, Mike, for questions.
Wonderful. So I'll just close down the I'll close down the presentation, and then I'll just take any questions that we might have.
I just wanted to thank you, Mike. It was a great topic, and it's very timely. I've been reading the book, The Advantage, and they talk about trust is the bottom pillar of the pyramid, and I've been trying to use it in team building, and yeah, I unconsciously did some of it, but I wasn't aware of the priority that it takes. And then if you don't have that level of trust, then trying to push the other things above it through just doesn't work. So I'm spending more time with my team, working on some basic things. And a lot of times we don't trust people because we don't even know them. You know, we may work with them for 3 or 4 years and we didn't know they had a brother or that you know what I mean, or where they were from. We found out in our leadership meeting yesterday that 3 of the 5 people are immigrants. We just didn't know that. And that's, you know, that to me was pretty amazing. Like that, you know, is shows you what the world is kind of doing, right? You know, people are moving and families are moving. And then what was interesting was the only other 2 of us that were left, one of those was just first generation, right? So his mother came from Malaysia. I was the only one that was in Canada before it was a country. But that's even, in a way, we were English loyalists that moved up from the US. So we are immigrants too. So I guess you could say that most white people in North America were all immigrants in some fashion. We came from somewhere else. But I think that those trust building exercises like that seem so basic, they're really not being done. And that's why we have this kind of, it's almost like in our meetings, we don't get the conflict we want because we don't really know the people and we don't really trust them. And so without that healthy conflict, then you basically get people that you're creating harmony in a way, but it's a false harmony. You know,
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate you speaking to us about your own personal experiences. And I just being mindful of everybody in the room, I see a lot of questions coming in the chat. And I also see Catherine has her hand up, and I wanted to invite Catherine as well to share her question with us. And Catherine, you're welcome to mute, and thank you, John.
Thanks,
You're
John.
welcome.
Thanks so much. Really great presentation. I also have been working through a number of trust pieces, including Stephen Covey, The Speed of Trust. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what is the most important thing, given the global sort of decrease in trust that we're seeing that you've shared? What is the most important action that leaders can take today to start turning that around?
Right. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I really, when you take a look at a framework that could support action for turning things around, the idea of the uncertainty and vulnerability piece, what particular factors are showing up that are creating uncertainty, and what is at stake with regards to vulnerability, and the more clarity you can create around those particular lenses, I think that you're increasing the probability of having higher levels of trust.
Awesome. I have another question here in the chat that and people are welcome to use the raise hand function and I can call on you. So a question here, oh, sorry, I lost it. Maybe my question is outside the boundaries, but can you discuss the responsibility to bring the trust and benevolence lens equally to everyone you deal with in your team? And do you have to, is one of the questions we have.
I'm just wondering, would you be able to clarify a little bit further on that one, just so I can maybe give the right answer or a more accurate answer?
Absolutely. Miriam, I'd invite you to unmute your mic if you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, sure, I have. I'm not sure I can clarify. I guess it's just a question in my mind. Your relationships with your team are different. They're all individual relationships. And how are you fair in how you build trust based on really quite different relationships? I don't think that clarifies it any better, but.
No, trust is like, it's gonna be unique to each relationship. And as we take a look at, the ideas of the uncertainty piece, like it's gonna be the individual factors that are associated with it and the context. So the more that we can fill out with the individual and the context pieces, the higher probability we're going to know, okay, how do we understand what particular things we need to do to satisfy that trust relationship. It's not a one size fits all approach for everybody within your team, but it's just, it is understanding the different parts of the system regarding with your team. Does that answer it a little bit?
Yeah, I think it does. It's just the challenge of treating people differently sometimes is interpreted differently.
So like if you take a look at it, and I didn't include it in this slide deck because there's just so much to talk about when it comes to trust. There's a systemic piece to it as well. It's the idea of like, there's the individual, there's the team, there's the organization. So you can take a look at those layers of uncertainty and vulnerability through those different contexts as well. So if you take a look at the team context, like how are you removing layers of uncertainty and vulnerability, like at the team level or at the organizational level?
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
And I see that William has his hand up. And William, I invite you to unmute your mic and you can share your...
Already unmuted. Thank you, Emira. And hello, Mike.
Hi, William.
Yeah, hello, how are you?
Good.
Yeah, I just thank you for bringing up this discussion. You are more of a glass half full person. I'm a half glass empty. Because I was saying in the breakout room, to me, I think ever since the Vietnam War and the Nixon administration, the public's ability to trust, as well as the public trust itself, has been eroding ever since. And of course, with all this controversy with the neoliberalism in the capitalist environment, and then with the polarization of people as with the social media, and of course, which bring up the result of the Trumpism and all these other stuff. I mean, it's almost 50 years of this split in the people. So I am very pessimistic as to the repair of the public trust. And also because of the breaking up of the social fabric, I think a lot of people are not very willing, if not unable, to trust. So it's good to see that you have brought up the framework, and it's a good way to look at it. But I'm just quite unsure as to how the society as a whole, or humanity as a whole, can rebuild the level of trust that maybe our parents or grandparents had. Thank you.
Oh, that's a really good good comment there, William. And all the data that we're seeing, is definitely supports that idea of trust is significantly declining. But I think that I don't know if it's the answer, but there are ways we can measure it and understand it. And I don't know if it's going to happen at a global level, but I'm hoping that there's definitely things we could do to be able to support that as well.
Yeah, see, in a way, I also see it as maybe I don't have offspring, whereas you have 2 daughters. So of course you want the world to be more hopeful for them. Whereas I don't care, because after I'm gone, nobody's following me. Thank you.
Thanks, William.
So we have 2 more questions in the chat that I would love to ask, and then I think we'll wrap up today's session. But I'm so happy that we've had so much dialogue and discussion. I'm just learning so much being a part of this. So the first of the 2 questions, Mike, is do you have any suggestions for further reading resources in this topic, such as books or articles? And the ones you share out, I can share them out as well by email with everybody after this.
Yeah, there's a few ones. There's some more academic in nature, and there's some less academic in nature. Harvard Business Review has quite a few really good articles on trust. I really like the Neuroscience of Trust. That's one that was published, I think it was in 2007, if I recall right. There's several academic journals. I'll send them to you, Amira, and then you can redistribute them. The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. He uses language that parallels Mayor Davis and Scorman's framework. But really it's their framework, but that book really does a nice job at talking about trust, the economics of trust. That's a good one. There's a couple good TED Talks out there. Francis Frey from Harvard University offers a good TED Talk on trust. If you were to type in Francis Frey, F-R-E-Y, and trust, she gives a really good TED Talk there. And Simon Sinek, he actually has a really good perspective on trust as well. I feel like if you type in Simon Sinek and trust, you'll see some pretty good stuff that shape like a really good perspective towards trust thinking.
Awesome. So I jotted some of those down, but I'm glad you're going to send me an email with the rest because I couldn't write them all down.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And the last question that we'll be finishing today's session on is, with mental models, I feel like trust is something that comes with time. Are there exercises one can do to develop trust quickly in some situations?
So that's a good question. And I'm just reflecting on it, thinking about it, because obviously we're talking about the trust decision. So the decision to trust is uncertainty and vulnerability. So understanding how much uncertainty is at place, in place, and how much vulnerability we're asking of somebody. So to remove uncertainty, it's almost, you need to match it as well, right? You need to come at it with as much information as you possibly can to be able to mitigate that one factor. And then with the vulnerability, we see this in, I see it in coaching all the time, and I see it, with emotional intelligence and emotional expression stuff, is the idea of you almost have to match vulnerability with vulnerability. So you have to show up with vulnerability to be able to sort of create vulnerability too. So I'm hoping that that might be of service, like to that question there. But really, it comes down to that trust question framework and understanding the individual, the context of the situation, and knowing really what you're dealing with.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. I learned so much today. And I'm looking forward to reflecting on everything that we've talked about. I will be sharing an email out with everybody, and it will include the recording and the Jamboard and all of these resources. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and being here today. And looking forward to seeing you next month at the next Insights for Action session. Hope you have a great rest of your afternoon or evening or morning or wherever in the world you're joining us from.
Thank you so much.